Hello Internet and welcome to another episode of Experimental Cataclysm, the show where I talk about recent changes that have been made to the experimental version of Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. We've got a fair bit to talk about this week, so let's just dive into it. First up from Night, we have a change affecting stamina consumption while swimming. Based on what I saw, it looked like swimming previously did not use stamina at all. So, although weight limitations on swimmers were quite severe, there was nothing to stop you from swimming indefinitely, even at zero skill. I could be completely wrong about that. I had a hard time finding out how it used to work, and honestly, I never used the athletic skill in the game. Thankfully, that doesn't really matter anymore because things have changed. In the game now, swimming will consume stamina. The rate at which it consumes stamina is determined by your athletic skill level. At level 0, you will have a very hard time maintaining stamina, which will lead to it being depleted, and then you will start to drown. There is a chart in the PR that shows stamina consumption based on your athletics level, which I will put on screen here. And for point of reference, simply walking would have a value of 15 on that chart. Now, I don't really like that swimming eventually will consume less stamina than walking. I don't think that makes sense. I also don't really like that you can regain stamina by simply passing turns while you tread water. At high skill levels, you will be able to swim more or less indefinitely without issue. I do like that there are some restrictions being placed on swimming via stamina. It does make sense and was something we should have had for a long time. It just seems like it gets too low over time. And I still personally view athletics as the single least valuable skill in the game, and I just haven't really seen any indicator that that's going to change. Frankly, if I need to cross water, I'm still going to build a boat 100% of the time, but maybe that's just me, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, now swimming will consume stamina, so just be careful if you swim anywhere. Next up from Frizz, we've got a change to how zombie loot will work, making it so that zombies will no longer resurrect without their items. Now, this has been a conversation topic in the community for years. Previously in the game, when zombies would die, their items would be dropped. Then later on, when they revived, their items were left behind and the zombies would resurrect as Nekkid. In fact, I just made a tutorial video where I talked about this, and I now have to go back and fix it because it has changed now. And I guess that's a little annoying, but honestly, I'm super glad to see this get merged. This PR started back in August and creates a quote, corpse pocket. When an enemy dies, their items go into this pocket. The player cannot put stuff in it, but they can take stuff out. In other words, you can pick up the zombies' loot, but you can't put things in that pocket. Then when an enemy does revive, the remaining items will be placed back into their inventory. If they die again, those same items will then be available for pickup. So it now works in a way that is much more realistic rather than having zombies kind of shimmy out of all their clothes at the moment of their death. Additionally, removing items will now take 1 second, presumably to represent removing things from the enemy's pockets or, whatever. And I personally think this is a reasonable amount of time for most items, but since we are technically undressing the body, I think clothes items should take significantly longer to pick up. And I have no idea how you would implement that or if that's something people would want to see, but that's what I personally think should happen. Anyway, that's the gist of this PR, pretty straightforward as far as things go, and I think it's honestly a really great change. There were some related issues like advanced inventory was not working with the corpse pocket, and there was some weird display stuff, but I do believe that those have been resolved or are being worked on at the moment as of this recording. So yeah, great stuff, happy to see that. Next up, we've got a change that's more of a, hey, look at this cool thing that was added than it is a detailed explanation of what it is. Drew4484 has added some non-combat exoskeletons to the game. Currently, you can only find these in lab finales, at least from what I saw, and they are based on real-world models. We already sort of had this in the form of the lifter mech, whatever that thing is called, but I imagine these are smaller since they're based on real-world designs. The old lifter, I'm pretty sure, was just an Aliens reference and isn't something that would be practical in real life, or at least it would probably not be that size. So yeah, cool new thing. I have no notes on this. I'm not really one to complain about cool new exoskeletons being added to the game. Next up, we've got a change from bombastic slacks related to backpack pockets. This PR is titled Clip-On Pockets, and honestly, when I first saw this, I was a bit excited, and although the title is accurate, it's not exactly what I thought it was. So basically, this PR adds a variety of new quote-unquote pockets that you can then use to clip items to your backpack. Some of them are things like tool loops, so instead of wearing an extra garment or a utility belt or something like that, you can simply hold your crowbar in your backpack now. That on its own, I think, will please a lot of players. There are others like a carabiner to clip things to your pack, water bottle pockets, things like that. However, there are some drawbacks to using these pockets. Not only is there additional encumbrance, some of these pockets may also cause you to make noise while moving, and some of them will even drop items if you get grabbed by an enemy. This is probably the single biggest drawback to using them. Having an item stripped away from you while in combat is a huge problem because you may miss the message in the log and end up losing something permanently. Additional encumbrance or noise, they're really not as big of a deal as losing an item. And honestly, most of you, I guess, drop your packs before you get into melee combat, so probably even being stripped of items won't be a big deal either since you'll just have dropped your pack. By default, these new pockets have a very low priority, meaning your character will try putting items in less problematic pockets before they use these clips and things like that. Now in my testing, I wanted to see the messages associated with losing items and things like that, but I could not find a way to actually use these pockets. Even when my other pockets were full, I couldn't find any item that could be clipped to them. It's not really clear to me if this is a bug, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it's my fault and I was doing something wrong. They're very new, I don't know how they work, it's probably because I didn't understand something. But anyway, so I don't have the exact messages or explanations of how to use all these different new features of this change. I do wish, though, the one complaint I have is that there was an easy way to tell the game, hey, don't ever use this pocket. Now I know that you can do this using the whitelist and blacklist thing and do that on every individual pocket, but I do wish this menu just had like one button, one simple toggle on and off for that said, hey, just never use this pocket, I don't want anything in here. And of course that's not really within the scope of this PR, that's more about the blacklist screen than anything. Ultimately, anyway, I think this is a really cool change. If nothing else, I think that a lot of you will be happy to find that you can now hold certain items on loops of your backpack rather than wearing a tool belt or something specifically for that purpose. Almost all of the backpacks in the game have been given some form of these new straps. If you're interested, there's a chart in the PR, which of course I will link in the description down below. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, we have some additions and expansions to ballistic armor from Bombastic Slacks. This adds a few new armors along with different variations of those armors. And although many of these garments are tagged with the word vest, they can actually include armor that covers the arms and legs. Now I won't lie, my knowledge of body armor pretty much comes exclusively from video games. I don't know much about real-world variations or even how accurate those games are, even when they do feel realistic. For example, I play Tarkov sometimes, but I don't know if those are modeled on real-world things, if you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, I really like this change because it adds some variety to the properly manufactured, like pre-Cataclysm type body armor. And honestly, it jives with realism. Obviously, armors come in a lot of different sizes and shapes and with different materials. However, because of my lack of knowledge on this subject, I can't really say much other than that I like the variety in the game and I like the idea of expanding the armor. Check them out when you find them and take note of which body parts they cover. Beyond that, I really don't have much to say here, but I do like this change. Next up from Vectus99, we've got a change to the way forests are generated and look in the game. Now all of us have seen forests and know that they tend to generate in very straight lines. You can see the edge of where forests begin and end very clearly, and corners also were very obvious. Now this change has essentially made it so that this line is not so clearly defined. This makes forests look much more natural, and in my opinion they look really great. The PR covers a lot of what they did and how they did it, but it's a bit much for a smooth brain like me, so I don't really have much to say about it. It's another one of those, hey, look at this cool change without much feedback from me. Old areas that you've previously explored, they will still have those rigid edges because the terrain has already been generated, but as you move on and go through the world, you're going to notice that things look a lot more natural now, and I really do like this quite a lot. Next up from mail clips, we have an increase in the monster density found in houses. So I'm sure you're probably really sick of hearing me say this, but for a long time, my biggest issue with the game has been the strange clustering of enemies. I've always felt that most people would have died in their homes, either on their own or gathered with other family members in like one specific house, you know, like Aunt Rita's house or something like that. And it always bothered me that houses were basically empty, but other locations had dozens of enemies. Now Mail Clips has gone and made it so that zombies will be found much more commonly in houses. And combine that with the fact that Inglonious has been auditing a lot of locations to rein in some of the heavy spawns in just random places, I think this is really moving in a great direction. Personally, I love that houses will have more enemies in them. It makes sense with our lore, and it adds more challenge to what are the single most common building in the game. This adds a small level of complexity to looting these places, since you will now have to be more cautious moving through or around them. But again, the main thing that I like about this is that it makes sense. And my only concern here is that with the bump in monster density inside houses, we may have some balance issues or kinks to work out if the streets or other locations still have a high number of enemies. It's really the only thing I can think of that would be at all problematic with this, but it's also something I'm not going to know for sure until I've played with it for a while. But anyway, I think that's really great, and I'm happy to see that. It's probably my favorite change in this episode. And in fact, I think that's where we'll wrap things up. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, maybe toss me a sub if you're a good human being, and I of course will be back with another episode in a couple of weeks. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.